Hey everybody, I am Phil from Reckless Historians. Welcome especially to the first article in the series that I'm doing on Dr. John Fia's new book, Why Study History? Reflecting on the Importance of the Past. My initial thoughts, got a pretty sweet cover. I just remember a few of my buddies in my historical methods class, whenever they were looking at the cover, they said something like, well, now I have to get it. I'll admit the cover is pretty cool, but what I was really excited for was what was inside. And so as I read through this first chapter, I could almost imagine Dr. Fia sitting at the head of my historical methods class, and I can hear his voice just crescendo as he explains his love for history. Now, reading through the first chapter, I was immediately reminded of some of the chapters from Sam Weinberg's book, Historical Thinking and Other Unnatural Acts, Charting the Future of Teaching the Past, Critical Perspectives on the Past. I did a short series on this over the summer, no videos, just some really boring articles. But this summer, I just got so hooked about how historians think and the things they do to study the past. And where I think Dr. Fia's book, particularly his first chapter, differs from Weinberg's, is that I feel like Dr. Fia goes into a lot of depth on the 5 C's and he uses really simple terms. And what are these 5 C's? Well, I will get to them later. Let's dive into the beginning of the chapter, though, and the more specifics. Dr. Fia opens up by asking a lot of questions about what do historians do. First thing he makes clear is that he breaks apart and defines that there is a difference between studying history and studying the past. If I had to pinpoint one of the most valuable lessons that I have learned at Messiah College in terms of studying history, it would be realizing that the past and history are not the same thing. Why Study History discusses how the past is the past, a record of events that occurred in bygone eras. The past is dates, facts, things that happened, and you'll see that on page 2 of the book. Now, on the other hand, Dr. Fia also opens up one paragraph with a very simple sentence in terms of structure, and I also think it conveys a really powerful message. It's only 4 words. History is a discipline. Now, what we can infer from that statement is that history involves interpretation. It involves understanding the past. It's something that needs to be constantly pursued. How do we understand this past? Well, that's easy. The 5 C's. So one of these 5 C's, page 6 of Dr. Fia's book, it says, according to Thomas Andrews and Flannery Burke, when doing their work, historians must always be sensitive to change over time, context, causality, contingency, and complexity. So let's dive into these. Dr. Fia talks about change over time, meaning that there's continuity. So if you're looking for a 6th C, continuity. There's continuity in the past. One example he uses is when in the 2012 London Olympics, there is an opening that went through the history of England. I love this opening. I heard other people tell me that it was kind of boring or whatever. But really, what Dr. Fia is trying to pinpoint here, and what I'm getting out of it too, is that it displays in such a relatively short amount of time the idea that history has changed over time as it takes England from its agrarian roots up to its industrialized state, which I think is pretty sweet, and it's a great example that Dr. Fia uses to talk about that change over time. And one of the best ways to really understand that change over time is to see the context. Do you ever get really frustrated, whether it's in class or conversation or whatever, whenever people take what you say out of context? My friends know that that's a really good way to tick me off. And I get really frustrated because I feel like my message isn't being accurately portrayed. And Dr. Fia talks about this, and he articulates that the context provides meaning. He talks about understanding any document, phrase, event, in the context of the larger picture. And part of understanding that picture leads into the 3rd C, causality. Now, in elementary school, I hated doing those cause and effect charts. Anybody out there that remembers what those are, they can give me a holler in the comments section or whatever. But yeah, they really ticked me off. But now I see how important they are. Because as Dr. Fia says, it's really important to understand what caused events like the Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, and so many other events. And Dr. Fia also points that at the point where you start talking about causality, At that point in telling the story of what happened, historians stop just laying out facts and start to do the explaining part of history. Now, in regards to contingency, he defines contingency as the free will of humans to shape their own destinies. Often you'll probably hear a historian say something like, well, it was contingent on this and this and this and this. I think what contingency does, and in particular what Dr. Fia thinks it does, is that contingency helps turn history into the narrative. I really like how he phrased that, using how contingency helps turn history into the narrative, because I think that the narrative is something that's very important whenever you're trying to deliver history. Now, the final C is complexity. History isn't as black and white as those talking heads on TV may lead you to believe. Dr. Fia points out that there is a deeper story in understanding the past and understanding people too. After the 5 C's, we get to something that really intrigued me. Dr. Fia brought up this idea that all historians are revisionists. Immediately after stumbling upon that idea, I'm immediately thinking of the same TV heads that were telling you history is just fact, who are now using the word revisionism as if it's a sort of curse word. As Dr. Fia explains, being referred to as a revisionist should really be taken as a compliment. History is constantly being revised, and that's the beauty of it. As Weinberg discusses, and I think in particular, as Dr. Fia discusses too, like, there is an argument behind history. You know, there's interpretations, there's butting heads about what actually happened, what's important, and things like that. There's constantly explanations coming out about why things happened or why certain events hold particular importance. If history was just a bunch of facts, then there would be no true meaning behind it, and the point of this book would be mute. On this earth, we will never know our entire past. Dr. Fia kind of closes up the chapter before he sums everything up with this idea. We will never know every single thing that happened. And if you ask Dr. Fia if he thinks that this statement makes studying history weaker, you know, after reading this book, I think he would truly pity you. And it's because historians seek truth. And while we may not always know all of it, we'll continue to seek out what we can and learn from what we have. Learn what we can from the past that we have. Okay, that's enough for the first chapter. If you want to keep reading, you can go to Amazon and buy it for $11.70, you know, plus some shipping fees, but it's not bad at all. Go ahead, add it to your cart. It's a great read for a great price. I look forward to talking to you all about Chapter 2. Until then, ta-ta.